The AD is replete with experienced former ministers who have performed very well and have a track record of performing well in various ministries where they were ministers and heads of ministries, more than any other political party in Lesotho. You take anyone you wish. They don't even have as much as 1/4 of the number of former well-performing ministers in their potential ministers, that is, who could be appointable as experienced ministers, former ministers with a good track record. That is the crux of the reason. And there was a demonstration of that when my party, the AD, was part of a 4-party coalition. There were those who decided to force the AD out for fear, and they expressed it publicly and openly that they feared that our party was performing so well that at the end of 5 years, the electorate would be left with no choice but to vote for AD. So the reasons we have already been provided unwittingly by others, not by ourselves, unwittingly by those who were in partnership and who were in a majority governing party. The position of the AD on this matter is twofold. There is an existing legislation, Electoral Act of Lesotho. It provides for only one consideration, and that is the consideration of the number of registered electors in every constituency. That is the law as it stands. But our view is that in future, post the coming election, the country could have a rethink and review the considerations to be taken into account when delimitation of constituencies is done. Such as, one consideration could be the number of electors, as is the case now. Another one could be the size of constituency area-wise. See, in the mountain terrain, in the mountain areas of Lesotho, the population is very sparse, widespread. So constituencies in the mountains of Lesotho could end up being inordinately large in order to capture the same population within each constituency. That would mean that government or the IEC would have to set 1,000 voting areas in order to cover one single constituency. And also imagine if we were to have still more and more dense urban areas, storage buildings, apartment buildings. We could easily, theoretically, end up with just 2 or 3 streets delineated as a constituency. So that's our position. There is an existing legislation now which must be followed as far as we are concerned, and the possibility of having a look at the various considerations to be taken into account when delimiting constituencies. We believe that government should be the regulator. Government should level the playing field. And government should have no business in business. Leave business to the private sector. So if you want to address the issue of unemployment, have a conducive climate, engender a conducive climate for the private sector to find it comfortable to invest in Lesotho. And that's only if government behaves as a regulator, as an agent for leveling the playing field, easing the taxation laws, giving tax haven regime, special economic zones, so that the company taxes are close to zero. Then the whole private sector community would find it conducive to invest in Lesotho and provide the requisite jobs. Government is not a provider of jobs. And they should not have part in providing jobs. Government should be very lean and small and allow the private sector to provide jobs. So that's our position. Government to regulate, private sector to employ, because they find it conducive. The reason there is so much corruption is that politicians have a sense of insecurity of tenure because of the high turnover of governments. The coalition governments have hardly lasted 3 years. It is only the government in which I was Deputy Prime Minister, which lasted 3 years. Prior to that and after that, unless we have a government of national unity, which provides a security of tenure for the public officers and the ministers, if we have a government of national unity, that is the sine qua non, the condition necessary to provide stability. And if there is stability for the politicians, for the ministers to have a predictability of spending 5 years in ministerial positions, then they are less likely to be prone to the temptations of corruption. Now they are corrupt because people have a feeling, if you take the current government now, they knew that they were going to last 2 years and no more. 2 years. So they are trying to frantically take everything, line their pockets before they get out of office. And it's disgusting. So we need stability of the government, security of tenure for government employees, ambassadors, senior government officials, and so on, in order for them to be less tempted to engage in corruption. So that is our idea of acquiring the security of tenure, a government of national unity. Crime and violent crime sometimes it's done by people who should be protecting the populace. And it's domestic violence born out of social problems of unemployment for men and inadequacy of men, resulting in crime. But I don't think it's fair to characterize our country as the worst crime-ridden country in the world. It isn't. There are much, much worse. We must invest in education, only in relevant education, which teaches life skills in technology, in engineering, and science subjects, which are good for today. So, but we need to invest heavily in education, more than in any other sector. Because it's only through education, good training of our people, and recognition of people's skills, even if they are not formally trained, but people with skills. Chinese are friends of Lesotho for a long time, and we should avoid xenophobia against any nationality of people. So I'm not uncomfortable with anyone. We have been influenced by Europeans for a good part of 200 years in Lesotho and 350 years in Southern Africa. There were no Chinese there. Chinese themselves have turned the tables on Europeans in terms of their own development. We need to take a sheet out of the book of the Chinese and learn from them instead of being uncomfortable with them. We should learn from them how they do things. We have been following Europeans, and that hasn't paid off. So I hold a completely different view. Anybody suspected of a politically motivated crime should be given amnesty, and but it should be preceded by truth and assurance that such crimes couldn't be repeated. We have had politically related crimes committed since 1966. People were murdered, people were tortured, people were disappeared for political reasons, and we should have a truth and reconciliation, just like the South African did, because if it's politically motivated, clearly the only solution is a truth and reconciliation, and amnesty. The country might not afford the reparations, but if you did, it should be without any prejudice to anyone. Then we would have to get all the people who have disappeared, been killed since we got our independence 56 years ago, all of them given compensation equally, if it can be demonstrated that it was politically motivated. So it's just a matter of closing the chapter of the past and looking forward and focusing on where we should be headed.